And music, I try to ground with the bass in mind, but I think
It's fascinating.
Alright, I'm gonna use the restroom.
Oh, sure thing.
Is it just out there somewhere?
Yeah.
So one of the behind that belt as well. I still don't know.
Yeah.
What's the reason? I think
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time on a Saturday to join us. This is our first town hall of the second session for the Center for Dharma Education Leadership Committee. We've been hosting town halls for about 9 months now, and we're trying to center them centrally on different social issues, dynamics, and our group, the Center for Dharma Education Leadership Committee, has been tasked and asked by the temple to find a way to bring more 18 to 45-year-olds from the congregation or outside the congregation into the fold at the temple. So the town hall series is part of that, and at the end we'll let you know what some of the other town halls that will be coming up throughout the rest of the year. Some very exciting stuff, and we're so glad you can make it for our first session of the year. And we appreciate all of your time and coming and joining us for this particular panel. So this will be on how to make Hindu temples more green-friendly. Before we started, just wanted to introduce a couple of the other leadership committee team members that are here. You can just give a little wave. There's Vijay in the back, Kavita, and Vinny, Sujata, myself, and all of you are welcome to join us. So if you're interested in the leadership committee, figure out what we're doing, how we're doing it, please feel free to reach out to any one of us. And format for today is we'll have a town hall panel presentation till about 4 o'clock, so about 50 minutes. I'll be posing some questions, they'll be chatting, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. We'll try to wrap up at 4:30, and we'll just enjoy each other's social conversations at that point. So, okay. Quick last question is, how many of you found out about this event through Facebook? Wonderful. Or how many of you were invited directly by one of the CDELC members? How many of you are married to a CDELC member? Good, perfect. And if you have any real deep, interesting questions to ask, my daughter Gayatri's in the back. You can ask her. She'll be working on homework the rest of the time. Okay, wonderful. So I wanted to, and my name is Rohit. Sorry. I wanted to begin, Gopal Patel is joining us from the Bhumi project, and he's going to help set the stage with the interrelationship between some of the themes and theories and ideas about sustainability and being green-friendly and how it interlaces with Hinduism. So, Gopal,
yeah,
thank you.
Thank you so much. It's great to see everyone here is between the age of 18 and 45. That's good to see. Rohit asked me just to share a few words. The work that I do at our organization called the Bhumi project is to look at the intersection of Hinduism and the environment. And we've been doing that work for about 10 years now, and I can talk more about that later. But it's really interesting that over the last 10 years, just how much environmental sustainability has become such a mainstream issue, and that so many Hindu temples and organizations are taking this issue seriously as well. From issues around climate change to environmental sustainability to wildlife conservation as well. And the time is right that we are talking about these issues. I mean, just this weekend there was a cyclone in Orissa, and thankfully the authorities there were able to move 1 million people out of harm's way. And there's a great article in the New York Times around how they did that. And so the human cost of that cyclone is very low, but obviously the financial impact is going to be devastating. So we see these natural events happening regularly, and there's a real need for Hindu voices and Hindu perspectives around sustainability to be brought, not just within the Hindu community, but into the mainstream society as well. So I just want to share a few things that we talk about when we do talks or projects on Hinduism and the environment. that may just help spark some interest and imagination before we kick off the formal discussions. And there's a great, most of what I'm going to say is from this book, so you could just get this book. It's called Hinduism and Nature. It's by an author called Dr. Nandita Krishna from Chennai. She runs the C.P. Ramaswamy Foundation, and she's one of the leading experts on Hinduism and nature in India. And she's been doing this work for decades and is a real activist, so I really recommend you get this book. But what's really fascinating is what she says is that, and I think most of us would agree, that Hinduism really approaches the world from a cosmic perspective rather than an anthropocentric perspective. Right? We view the world as a cosmos, right? And we view our role in that cosmos. And that's very powerful for us to retain and understand what that means. It means that the world isn't about humans, and creation isn't about humans. It's about the whole cosmos, the interconnectedness of all life, and how humanity plays into that system of interconnectedness. And in the Rig Veda, one of the first principles in there is this principle called Rita, RTA, which talks about a universal system or universal order or balance. And it says that humanity has a role to play to maintain that harmony and the balance in the natural world. And so that's a huge philosophical concept that's right at the heart of Hinduism that most world religions don't even come close to, right? So that's one very powerful thing that we can bring to the table immediately. This idea that everything is interconnected, and we as individuals and collectively have a role to maintain that harmony and the balance in the natural world. But how does that play out in Hinduism? And I'm going to give a couple of very quick examples. The first is, in Hinduism, you see the respect for the earth throughout. Let's just look at trees and plants, right? Tulsi. Most Hindu homes have a Tulsi plant, right? How many traditions do we know where it's a practice to worship trees on an almost daily basis, right? We have to, if you're a Krishna Bhakta or a devotee of God, worshipping Tulsi is almost a central part of your practice, right? If we look at texts like the Ramayana, Mahabharata, where did Ram go when he was exiled? Where did the Pandavas go when they were exiled? They didn't go to the city, they didn't go to the clubs, they went to the forests, right? And you see in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata so many rich descriptions of what life is like in the forests. And from these personalities we can learn the importance of living in harmony and balance with the world, with trees and plants. You have these famous forests in Hinduism, the Dandakaranya forest or the Naishinaranya forest, where the Srimad was spoken. So many forests are there within Hinduism as well. And actually, the very first temples in Hinduism were found in the forests. And if you go to India now, many respected temples are actually deep in the forest, right? Let's not get too much into Sabrimala right now, but that's deep in the forest, and it's about a 45-day trek just to get there. Many, many temples, the original temples in India, were either in trees, were trees, or located in forests as well. There's this beautiful quote from the Varaha Purana, which I really liked, which I want to share. It says that if one plants a peepal tree, a neem tree, a banyan tree, 2 pomegranate trees, 2 orange trees, 5 mango trees, and 10 plants and creepers, if one plants all of those, one will never go to hell. That's in the Varaha.
What was that list?
It's 1 peepal tree. Yeah, but I like there's an emphasis on mangoes, 5 mango trees, right? Yeah. So the plant life, forest life is so central to all Hindu traditions and in the texts as well. But then there's water as well, and the world is facing an acute water crisis. In India, for example, by 2030, so in 12 years' time, in 12 years, India will only have 50% of the drinking water it needs for the 1.4, 1.5 billion people. Just imagine that. So water is so central in Hinduism because it is the basis and the nourishment of all life. And so that's why we have the Ganga, we have the Yamuna, we have the Saraswati, we have the Godavari, we have all these sacred rivers. And they were made sacred, not just because they are sacred, but because if you make something sacred, you care for it, right? So they weren't seen as these things to exploit or overuse or to pollute. I mean, that's the reality today. But traditionally, in our texts and our rishis, they said that these bodies of water are celestial beings and that we have to look after them. I'm sure in the temple here, the priests must do these prayers where I don't know the Sanskrit, when you call all the sacred rivers to a pot. You know, many pundits, they do this, they say, you know, the Godavari and the Saraswati and Yamuna, please become present in this water so that I can use it as offering. Because obviously, I don't know how sacred the Potomac is. If you live near there, you can tell me. But yeah, to make the sacred into something that wasn't actually sacred. So the caring for water was so. The final piece is around animals. And we had a really rich discussion just upstairs around animals and caring for animals. And I think out of the caring for animals within Hinduism comes out of this, one of the principles of this interconnectedness. But I think the more powerful teaching is one of the key things as Hindu groups you have to bring to the table is the teaching of non-violence. Is that we have no right to exploit animals for our own welfare, or our own diets, or our own sensations all the time. And this is so pronounced throughout Hinduism. And there are texts that say that for one who kills a cow, that person has to take birth for as many hairs there are on the body of the cow, for example. And there's teachings in the Bhagavatam that says that a devotee sees all life as sacred. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says that a realized person sees the equality and the equity in all species. He doesn't make a distinction between a human and a cat or a cow, right? All of them are equal from a spiritual perspective. And that's very basic Hinduism 101, but it's very revolutionary in the climate space. It's very revolutionary. Like in the Gita, Krishna talks about he is present in all of nature. That's a revolutionary understanding in the environmental movement. But for us, it's like basic. Of course the trees are sacred, of course the plants are sacred. But most people out there don't even look at the world like that. So we have profound wisdom and knowledge to give the world. And just to finish on the cow, because that's what we were talking about upstairs, I personally think this concept of sacred cow is central to Hindu environmental ethics and practice. The texts and the rishis say that how we care for cows is a reflection of how we care for the earth. If we can care for cows, we can care for the earth. The cow is considered a representative of the earth. In the Bhagavatam, in the first book, the cow is crying when she sees the bull, the representative of Dharma, struggling. And so you see the cow is personified as the earth throughout text. And we see the climate crisis right now, the environmental sustainability crisis right now. One of the key main contributors is animal agriculture, and of that is beef production, right? And so you see how in the modern world, the cow is being exploited and is causing so much climate change. And at the heart of Hinduism is this concept of you have to look after cows. And what's really interesting, I never thought of this before, but even the word in Sanskrit, gao or gai, it reflects so many things. So like, they ask like, what is your gotra, right? Like, what is your family lineage? So I actually found out today, gotra means cow pen, right? So when you ask people, what is your gotra, like, we mean like, what is your lineage? But actually we're asking like, what is the cow pen that you come from, like, you know, or the gopuram that you have at the temple entrance, right? That actually means the village of the cow, right? So we think the Golpura means entrance to the temple, but actually literal translation is the village or the place of the cow. So this idea of the sacred cow, which has been derided in Western society, and even in Hindu groups for a long time, is really at the heart of the environmental crisis. And so yeah, so we need to develop this, I have a scholar, friend in Oxford, he calls it bovinity, right? Right? Yeah, so there's a major environmental sustainability crisis going on in the world right now, and as Hindu groups and individuals, we have such a, it's not a challenge, we have such a responsibility. Like the third largest religious group in the world, the oldest main religious tradition in the world, we have these traditions and these wisdoms. And I think the biggest challenge, and I'll end here, I think the biggest challenge for us here in DC and for this temple as Hindus living in the West is, how do we take a lifestyle and a practice which is so centered in caring for the earth, how do we live that in a society which is established on the basis of exploitation of the earth? Right? That's our challenge. And if we can do that, starting here at the temple, that would be a wonderful first step for our community.
Thank you, Gopal. That's excellent framing and so much to think about. Appreciate it. So I'm going to ask the panelists just to introduce themselves, also the organizations that they represent, But I'm also going to just layer in a question that maybe you all can speak to as part of that introduction. So, and part of this also goes back to setting the stage on what is the problem that we're trying to address and frame the problem for us as a group. So, Helen, if you could start us off, my question that I'm going to ask is, after you've introduced yourself and also your organization so people get a sense of where you're coming from, is what are some of the practices at religious institutions that you've been a part of or seen that are harming the environment? What are those practices and strategies and tactics that go on that are actually doing harm to the environment that we're offering that we should all care about?
Okay, thanks. I'm Helen Rose, and I am the Religious Outreach Coordinator at Earth Day Network. We're a DC-based nonprofit. I met Paul recently, so he invited me to be here today, so thank you for having me. So one of the big problems that our organization has been looking at this year, in 2019, has been what scientists are calling the sixth mass extinction, which is this rapid acceleration of species loss. So we're looking at land animal loss of upwards of 40% worldwide, the same for marine animals, and also birds. So that's has been a big focus of our work this year. In terms of practices that are happening within the faith space, I think one big issue. Just this morning, actually, this conversation was happening within my family. My father said, you cannot get to this church in Northern Virginia by public transportation on the weekends. And so just having faith spaces isolated, where everyone needs to be driving, where everyone chooses to drive their individual car there. So getting transportation, getting to places of worship is a big issue.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Anuti Das. I'm the Director of Communications for ISKCON, International Society for Christian Consciousness. So I have international global responsibilities, and I'm based here in Washington, D.C. I was about to leave when you said 18 to 45-year-olds. There's a limit here I have to go.
I expanded the group to include myself. So you can do that too.
Thank you. So I just came from a holy festival, which was also today, and took a quick shower and ran over, so I'm happy to be here. And I really appreciate Gopal's introduction about the global perspectives of the communities about the environmental problem. I would say like a big issue, and something that I wrestle with in our organization, is it's almost like sometimes secular people get the need for the environment, and sometimes religious/spiritual people tend to think, well, it's not so important for us. And I think what you just said balances that actually for religiously minded or spiritual or committed Hindus, no, it is what we're supposed to do. And I think that's a really important part of it. I mean, you mentioned a couple of scriptural references. I know we might want to talk about that more later. But it is very much a part of it, the idea that, it gets back in Bhagavad Gita, basically teaching, I'm not this body, I'm the soul within the body. But everywhere there's life, there's also a soul. And also, it's not mine to exploit. The Ishopanishad, everything belongs to God. And I shouldn't think that it's all out there for me to grab. And I think, especially these days, we live in a society, there's ever more faster paced exploitation and success. I remember the bumper sticker years ago, but it seems more relevant today. You see sometimes that whoever dies with the most toys wins. And that's such a perversion, in my opinion, of real human values. But I think it's an example of the kind of philosophy, lifestyles that leads to that exploitation. So I think as a challenge for us as spiritually minded people to say, yeah, being spiritually minded doesn't mean I lose my care for the earth, but it increases my care for the earth. And I'll just give one practical example. Again, there was a very large Hindu conference last year that I attended. Maybe some of you also might have attended that. And I went for the lunch and the dinner, and they were serving lunch out, on something that was about 10 times more durable than a Frisbee. And I was shocked. I thought, is this a souvenir? You know, are we supposed to like carve our names in it and bring it back tomorrow morning? And then I was asking people, excuse me, you asked the waiter, are they recycling these? I don't know. It's okay, well, who's in charge? Who's the coordinator here? Are they recycling these? I don't know. Well, who's in charge of you? I don't know. And then somebody said, no, they're recycling. I said, where? You know, they said, well, and I finally found out actually they were just throwing a plastic bag and throwing it in the hotel dumpster. And I was thinking, wait a minute, this is a Hindu conference. Where's our application of Hindu values? So I think it gets down to each of us asking ourselves, how am I applying this in my life, in our temples, in our communities, in our families, and not just the tendency to think, you know, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. But it really gets back to, okay, what can I do? And how can I ask those questions in my own family, my own community, my own temple? What can we do to do that?
Hi everybody, my name is Anna Ka'awanui. I'm originally from Hawaii, but I now live in Virginia. I have my day job is at the U.S. Green Building Council. We have a green building rating system called LEED, which stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. So I'm all about promoting LEED in the built environment. One of my roles at USGBC is giving tours of our LEED Platinum headquarters. I like using the built environment as a teaching tool so that people can see, like, why have we designed it this way? Why have we chosen these types of materials and things like that? And so for me, what I think is very important is making sure people are educated about these types of decisions in the spaces where we live and the spaces where we work. You know, why did we select this type of air HVAC system for heating and cooling? Because it's more efficient and such. Why do we choose these types of materials that don't have volatile organic compounds or the new car smell? All the different choices that go into the spaces that we're in, I think people don't really pay attention to that. And so the first thing that we do when staff join us, besides the public that tours our space, is we go through and walk them around and say, these are the different strategies that we've used in the space, and this is why. Because I feel, what is the point of having a real energy efficient green space if people don't know how to use it, or you know, you're doing it for no reason. The other lens that I'm seeing this through is I also have co-founded a nonprofit recently called Capital Nature. And our mission is to connect people to the nature of the region, meaning finding as many cool opportunities in this area, in the Virginia, DC, Maryland area, to get people outdoors. And so I'm very involved in things like citizen science and stewardship opportunities and things like that. And so I feel very passionate, and now that I've used the built environment to kind of explain to people. One concept that I wanted to mention, has anyone ever heard of the concept of biophilia before? Is anyone biophilia? Anyone what you have? Anybody who was a Latin scholar that could figure out maybe what biophilia might mean, by any chance?
Love of nature.
Perfect. So biophilia means, and it's spelled with a PH, means love of life, love of nature. We had a biophilic design consultant on our art project. And that means, how do you incorporate design strategies that make people feel connected to the outdoors when you're in your workspace? And I became so sort of enchanted with that term. It's my third favorite word in the world, after wonder and joy, is to teach people about biophilia on our tours. And so just so that people can understand that there is that connection. And it's not just at work, but even at home. So just getting that connection to nature. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Follow up a little bit. Sorry, go ahead.
It's the same question.
Yeah, so just to rekindle the question, it was, what are some of the practices at religious institutions that you're familiar with that are harming the environment? Again, just trying to reframe the problem, and then, of course, introduce yourself, show them, and
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I run an organization called the Bhumi Project, which works with Hindu groups internationally. Previously, we were working a lot in India around environmental sustainability, and now our focus is specifically working on climate change, which is a subset, or the meta, whichever way you want to look at it, of environmental issues. And we do a lot of campaigns and advocacy work and training around that. And we're based between an organization here in the US called Green Faith, which does multi-faith climate change work, and the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies at Oxford University. And we also do some work with the UN, advising them on religion and environmental issues. So that's who we are and what I do. In terms of, I don't know, where do you want to start? Just building a temple, right? Building a place of worship, that's harmful for the environment, right? It displaces so many living beings. That's why I'm sure this temple did a Bhumi Puja when it was first established. Was it the right-hand corner, bottom right-hand corner? I think there's a place where you put Sheshanagos, in the ground, and you offer for forgiveness for just doing the building itself. It's like it starts from there. I think across the board, I would say all religious organizations are struggling with the challenge around environmental sustainability and the broader issues around climate change and species, biodiversity loss, and so on. But I think what my sense is, what is at the root of that challenge, and it's kind of what you spoke to about. I was at the same Hindu conference that you were at, where these plastic plates were just thousands of people were throwing these plastic plates every day in the trash over a 4-day period. It was horrendous. I think the challenge that all religious and spiritual communities, I would say across the board, have is reconnecting with the essence of their existence, both in terms of the institution, but also at an individual level as well. Because I think that's definitely in the West we've lost the kind of the spiritual aspect. I would definitely say within Hindu groups, but also other religious traditions as well. And we've shifted more to the cultural, social aspects of those traditions. And so we need to get back to the heart of Hinduism, we need to get back to the heart of Judaism and all these other world traditions. We're like, why were these traditions established? What did they teach at their core? And I think if our religious and spiritual traditions can answer those questions, right, then it's not difficult to make the decisions around should we recycle, should we compost, should we go solar, right? But it's coming back to the essence of like, why do we exist as an institution and also as an individual as well. I think that's the heart of the challenge for religious groups now. And I think that's as I said in my opening remarks, that's our calling now as well, because we need to bring our voices to the environmental sustainability stage in a way that we haven't done before, but we're able to bring so much more. But we can only bring it if we connect to the root of that spirituality.
So have you seen other organizations, temples, whether it's in the US, UK, and India, that have really articulated these Hindu values centered in and around environmental issues? Have they articulated it well?
It's interesting. I would say not so much in temples, but I would say like activists, Hindu activists, are articulating it. But we all know temples are big, they take time to move, right? They're like a big ship, it takes time to steer them in the right direction. But what is interesting are the Hindu activists, the environmental activists who are pushing it. So for example, the vegan movement is huge here in the US. Two of the biggest vegan movies are Cowspiracy and What the Health. They were both funded by a Hindu in Phoenix, Arizona, who made his money in Silicon Valley. He's a good friend of mine. He's a strong vegan advocate. His his cousin is on the board of the Livermore Temple in the Bay Area, which is the largest Hindu temple in the Bay Area. Like SSVT is the largest and one in DC. Livermore is the equivalent in the Bay Area. And last year he convinced that temple to do a full vegan Sunday meal. So a full South Indian spread, everything, 100% vegan, right? It was amazing. I mean, I wasn't there, but I've had vegan South Indian food. So it's like, I think and the same in India, it's the activists on the outside who are pushing the temples to be like, hey, let's look at, and even like here, it was the young people that are saying, let's look at why we're using styrofoam, right? And so the energy is coming from outside the established institutions, which I think is fine, but the established institutions are responding. I think, I'm not seeing so much from inside the institution, because, inside the institution they're concerned about paying the bills, making sure people coming through the door. But it's those people who are on the outside who are like, let's do more, we can do more. That's, I think, where the energy is.
Helen, have you seen?
Well, I actually wanted to just prepare a few slides. I thought this quote.
Should I move?
Sure. I thought this quote would be.
Oh, the theater.
You don't have to move. Would be applicable to our conversation right now. Why? So I think it's a question of why is our organization, or you might be wondering, why would an organization be working with faith communities and the environment with what Gopal said, where people are feeling this, or maybe not feeling, but showing this disconnect from their traditional religious values. So I just wanted to read this quote. I thought it would be perfect. and it's from Reverend Barbara Allen in her book Animals and Religion. And she writes that from the principles of ahimsa, nonviolence, in Buddhism and Hinduism, to the laws which relate to avoiding the suffering and pain of creatures in Judaism, we encounter the interdependence of life. The Jainist notion of reverence for life, pronouncement in Genesis that it was good, and the Islamic belief that all species are Muslim allow us to come to a realization or a deeper appreciation that non-human animals have value in our religious traditions, as well as in our hearts and homes. And I think we are starting to see movements in this area. Washington Interfaith Power and Light has a cool congregations program where they are helping folks across the country realize what they can do to address the climate crisis. Further in some slides, I have some examples of Gold Star churches, temples that have gone. One congregation in Connecticut went 80%, reduced their carbon output 80% with a solar installation.
Go ahead. I mean,
Okay.
so part of
No,
my,
sure.
for me, the practical ways that different organizations are getting into this and diving into this is
Yeah.
really where we as a group can add value. So I love seeing different ideas and different activities.
Okay, sure. Well, before we get there, I just wanted to share from our organization, we did produce a faith toolkit
Okay.
for this Earth Day that has fantastic links to the Bhumi project and their amazing guide that I spent some time looking at, the Green Temples guide, and I think that really is a nice place to get really focused on some really practical things you guys can do.
This is
Let me
Connecticut?
look at my notes.
Okay.
This I think is Connecticut. Oh no, this was going to be actually a quote from Bill McKibben, who is an activist, co-founder of 350.org. And he spoke to the two greatest inventions of the 20th century, being solar panels and the idea that Gopal spoke to around nonviolent social movements. So he thinks that those are the two things that are going to save us in the 21st century. Earth Day got started almost 50 years ago next year as a nonviolent social movement. It ushered in the Environmental Protection Agency, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. All of those laws in the United States didn't exist before 1970. And 20 million Americans were on the streets demanding that change across Republicans, Democrats, rich, poor, cities, rural folks. And then we have similar themes that I was remarking also on the movement already in this temple with the youth and their advocacy around styrofoam, but we're starting to see youth climate strikes in Europe and now across the world. Yesterday, there were over 700 actions, kids who skipped school to protest and demand climate action. I'll just skip forward to, there's the gold medallion. If your place of worship gets 40% or above in carbon reduction, you're classified into the whole congregation's gold medallion.
Do they offer funding or do they offer?
They don't. They offer technical assistance.
Okay.
At the local level, they'll do energy audits
Okay.
here in this region.
Free of charge type of something?
I think that it's free of charge.
Yeah, I was gonna put that on our research page.
Okay.
There was one congregation that did like a stopping idling campaign. So it was different. It was different. It was like more of an education. They kind of realized a little bit of the limits of what they could do, and they did more of an effort.
Thank you. Okay. I want to join you. From the ISCOM perspective, is there the same mindset of, how is the application of Hindu values being articulated within your organization?
By people that understand it, it's in very important ways, and by a lot of people who don't understand it or are not conscious of it at all.
I mean, is there even like a bill of
Yeah,
rights, so to
give an
speak?
example. I mean, I've got more of kind of a global experience, but say like, we have a project called Krishna Bali in Hungary, and it's a natural, completely off-the-grid environmental community, about 850 families or something like that. They have 30,000 people a year come to visit from the outside just to see how people actually can live in a more harmonious way. There's another community called Govardhan Eco Village outside Mumbai in India, and other projects. These are two. This one actually won an award from the United Nations for its environmental statement and how it's demonstrated how to really live in very, very simple ways and lowering energy consumption, etc. But then you go all the way back to people that still complain but it costs an extra 2 cents to try to buy biodegradable, serving silver, spoons and plates and things like that. So why do we need to do that? And I think it gets back again to Gopal's point that it boils down, what's our priority? And if we understand the religious tradition, then we say, well, this is the priority. It's not a question of can I do this or should I do this or what's the cost of that? Well, that's just who we are. But it hasn't sunk in entirely. We've got some very strong advocates doing some wonderful things. And as you mentioned, how I think a lot of it can start on small levels, like in our temple here in Potomac, as we know, people bring gifts for the deities and things like that, but there's a big sign that says, please take your plastic bag home with you. Don't come here like, whatever, 50 people come a week or a day and leave plastic bags. Well, that's a small step. It's just a reminder to people that we really have to live these values and not think that that it doesn't boil down to what we do as individuals as well.
So, I think you've all spoken in some way, shape, or form about models, different models that exist out there. And one of the risks with a model, and not knowing anything about the eco-village, but just as an example, it stands out as a model, and it can be, it's difficult for other entities to recreate it or for that to be scalable. That's always a concern in the environmental concern groupings, of course, and when battling climate change, this is a wonderful, brilliant idea. Now what? How do we take this out elsewhere? How do we replicate? Maybe that shouldn't be a concern. I'm not sure, but from this, and you spoke about the USGBC's offices being a place that you give tours and an exemplar
For education.
for educational purposes, and ultimately, I would imagine part of the goal is education for uptake. Uptake meaning I'm going to take that from that tour and try and figure out how to apply it elsewhere. Right? So what are some ideas I would ask each of you about taking a model example that you're familiar with, and how do we get it out? And how do we embolden it, strengthen it, evolve it, so to speak? And it might be even just the tour that you're giving, or even just USGBC headquarters, right?
I wish more lead projects actually gave the tours, because when people go on our tours and learn so many interesting things, they say, okay, this was great, like where else can I do this, LEAD right now, we have projects in 175 countries. So we're definitely global. One little tiny anecdote is one of the features on our tour is our architect did a materials sample wall. So it's this beautiful wall that has samples of each of the materials that respect for our space and why we picked them, where they came from, how far they traveled to get to the space, what was their impact, on the environment to get to our space and such. And the designer told me that was the only project that he'd ever done. That he was very proud of it, But I'm the staff photographer. I take a lot of pictures, and we have a team in Delhi. We have an office there, and they had asked me to take pictures of the materials wall because they were so impressed with it. And so a few months later, I was in a staff meeting watching a presentation from one of my colleagues in Delhi, and I saw a materials wall picture, and I said, what is that? And so it turns out like they liked the idea so much that they implemented it in their office across the world. And so for me, I just was overjoyed that, just by getting that sort of sample of how you can kind of spread, because it's tactile, people can take things off and feel it, they can touch things, they can see see maps of where they came from. And so just I think having little things like that that get people inspired to implement it elsewhere has been really helpful for us. Yeah.
Yeah, models. So just a quick plug regarding green temples. So like we wrote the book on it literally about 4 years ago, and this contains a lot of good models of practice. This is a resource guide for Hindu temples in India, and we worked with 30 temples across the country on how to be environmentally friendly over 8 thematic areas. Looks at energy, water, biodiversity, and so on. You can get this as a PDF on our website, but quick shameless plug there. But I think it's things like that. Last year we did research in India around what Hindu temples, actually not just Hindu temples, what religious institutions in India are doing around renewable energy. So we looked at churches, mosques, gurudwaras, mandirs, and we looked at what's going on in India when it comes to religious organizations and renewable energy. And we found right across the board, every religious tradition is working on renewables in India. Right? Tirupati has been doing it for about 10 years. I found out that the Jagannath temple in Puri got solar panels about 4 years ago, and it's powering 30% of their kitchen. Amritsar, obviously, their kitchen, which feeds 100,000 a day, is 100% solar powered. There's a 100% sustainable mosque in Karnataka. Brahma Kumaris in Abu have one of the largest solar parks in India. The Shridhi temple, they have this system there, but when you walk, it generates electricity. Like they have stuff in the flooring, right? So like there's amazing. I have a friend in Gujarat, in Baroda. He did the solar installations for the Brahma Kumaris in Tirupati, and he's like this crazy solar engineer, and he's developing a solar cremation thing, where like it's like a James Bond thing. You lay down and the solar comes, and but it's like but there's amazing solar jugaad going on in India right now, where people are like, how can we use solar to make our temples more environmentally friendly? So what we're doing, and this is an example of the models, right? What we found was there's great stuff going on across the country. Nobody knows about it. Like the Hindu temples don't know about it, the churches don't know about it. No one's talking to each other. So we went to the Art of Living Foundation in Bangalore, met with their main guys, and said, can we convene a meeting of all of these religious heads? Not the heads, but the engineers at these organizations. Can we bring them together with the solar social entrepreneurs and energy companies of India and create a roadmap for 2 to 3 years, for how we can scale up this work? Because the religious institutions have trust and a social cachet to kind of get things out there, but they don't have the expertise or the financing necessarily, right? So it's how do we bring expertise in from different industries and create a roadmap? And that's how we're trying to scale the modeling of good practice in India. And I feel like we're a very small organization, but that's something that we would love to do here in North America, right? Could we create an annual conference where we get Hindu temples together to think through, okay, how can we be more environmentally friendly, right? And can we club our resources together so that the cost, for example, of getting compostable plates, right? If you're a single temple, it's expensive. But if you get 10 temples in a state to buy them in bulk, the cost immediately come down, right? There's a business opportunity in there. If any entrepreneurs in the room, it's what you do, right? So it's things like that. I think we have to start thinking very creatively. Definitely, in all religious traditions, especially for our Hindu communities, about let's bring the engineering and the entrepreneurial spirit that we use in our business world to the faith world, right? And let's get for example, the Livermore Temple in the Bay Area, SSVT, Ganesh Temple in Flushing, Pittsburgh Temple. Let's get the 5-6 major Hindu temples in the US to issue a joint statement around sustainability climate change. Guaranteed game changer. People have to take notice of that, right? So it's little quick wins like that get you visibility, but then you have to back it up with action, which all these temples are doing in various ways. Right? So I think we have to be very strategic and smart, but I think we can do it because we have the resources, we have the manpower. We just need to do it.
How does this kind of grapple with this diffusion of ideas? I mean, is it all?
We want to get him more involved.
Clone him.
They can't afford me now.
I go back to a different scale because what he's doing is so important. But I think for most of it, it's a question of, and apparently it's after years, there with some of the younger people. I made myself kind of a pain in the neck at that conference because I like tracked it all the way
With that
up.
plate?
Yeah, and I refused to eat off it. You know, I went behind and they had like some stainless steel, whatever, I guess aluminum foil things that they were bringing the food in, and they were gonna throw away, and I took one and, you know, bent it to make it into a plate, because I was amazed. Very little thing, probably didn't affect a whole lot of stuff, but I think if everyone in this room and all the people we interact with, we all kind of make that kind of statements ourselves. Like I go to some discount temple, and if they're still serving off non-biodegradable things, they say, I don't eat off of those things. And then they all scurry around and go, why are you being so uncooperative? It's why are you being so unconscious of what we need to do? So I think, and you don't need to do it in a way, nice way, but I think that's really important. And I know like this community I mentioned over on Eco Village, one of the big things that they do to try to contribute is they host a lot of yoga conferences and things like that. So people come there.
When people had
Yeah, and a lot of, you know, from like New York and things like that, and, you know, their sense of being environmentalists is you climb up to your 15th-story office and you live in the city and everything that means. But, you know, they go there and they see bricks being made and they get their hands into the earth and they get a sense of what real organic, you know, growth means and things like that. So I think, you know, trying to be an example, questioning and then trying to be an example in every way we possibly can. And then cooperate with the kind of big efforts he's talking about.
And so Jeff has got a question, but just to push a little bit further on that. So how many temples are in North America?
About 60.
60. And the one in Potomac, in terms of energy efficiency, redesign?
It's an old building, but they're very conscientious about, you know, bio plates and things like that. And there's parking lots. Well, not the congregation so much, and people that live there, there's a lot of Priuses, and, you know, don't bring plastic bags, and, you know, things like that.
Is there an
And
example?
in fact, I want to get your card because we're also right on the brink of building a new temple, and I'm not on the committee for that. But I think.
We'll have you talk to some people.
Yeah.
It's pursuing LEED Platinum. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think double platinum.
Where's this one?
Yeah.
Where's this particular?
In Potomac.
Okay.
Yeah. But there's not enough conversation about leaders or should be.
And, okay, so Jeff?
Yeah, so to the point about, you know, changing the way individually we operate with plastics, I actually did kind of an experiment, but I still do it periodically. It's we camp a lot, and so I have lots of camp plates and stuff that are pretty portable. I actually, for a year, at my mission, which I go there very often, is I didn't use any of the plates. So anytime they're serving food, I always had my plate and Ian's plate, and my grandma was actually at her plate, and that's what we ask. And people will be like, what, why are you doing that? I'm like, because we're wasting all of this plastic or whatever we're using at the time. And at least, you know, my individual action, like I got to have a conversation about it. People were listening, and kids were watching me, and, you know, so that's on the individual side. And so my question was, you know, I guess how much of that balance needs to be individual push? And I know we talked about, you know, it coming from the outside in, but how much of it, you know, needs to kind of be like a rogue group of people that just say like, no, none of us are going to eat off this plate, and actually, to some extent, organize that and, you know, as a not like this kind of thing. Or how much does it have to really be from the inside? I mean, where is there a balance to that? And we kind of talked about it, but as we're thinking about acting.
I think it can be exhausting being that person who's conscious of things that are going on. Being conscious of the sacredness of the cow, being conscious of climate change, your energy. You know, it can be exhausting. So one of the models I wanted to bring up is the state of Maryland as a model, and the state of Maryland has the fourth best tax rebates for plug-in electric vehicles and electric vehicles, and it's not by accident. It's not like the magic fairy waved a wand and ta-da! There are people like working their butts off making that happen. Chesapeake Climate Action Network is a big proponent of that. So it doesn't take it kind of just takes that person who's screaming about the issues but working really hard, the activists, to make things happen. I think Maryland offers incentives also for home charging stations, which is like the only state in the country, I believe, that has a $700 tax incentive for getting.
It's 40%. What did you say?
40%, right? So, but the models being engaged politically in changing those systems, because really, plastic doesn't break down. plastic is going to be here forever, the plastic that we produce, and it's becoming real because it's in our water supply, it's in our bloodstream. This is a different conversation than it has been. And so I think people really are starting to wake up around the issue of plastics, evidenced by elementary school kids, getting mad at their parents for bringing plastic bags. But we're not really seeing yet the public policy initiatives that really do need to support this.
Well, we all spent about 45 minutes with some of the CDLC group and some of the temple leadership prior to this session, talking through what has been going on at the temple over the last 5 years, decade, 15 years, and I know that many of you all have had a strong hand in some of those activities. And for those of you that don't, I wanted to just frame it a little bit, and as an example, and we've been referring to it here, the switch from styrofoam to compostable. Shilpa and her colleague Sandhya, they were huge advocates in that regard, and got that change in 2015, 2016, I believe. And then our auspicious leader here on the board right now, he's been a big advocate, and one of the small but not so minor details that hopefully you've all noticed has been getting rid of the plastic bottles that the temple was selling for water. We have these water stations spread out throughout now, which is phenomenal. And the temple is foregoing income as a result of that. They made that conscious choice. There's a composting project that's in the works with regards to the Homa and the kitchen as well. There is a big initiative right now. The temple is under investigating what it's going to look like when they have to revamp their roof as well as their HVAC system, and what they could do to meet some of their sustainability goals and endeavors. So that is an ongoing conversation right now. But as you know, a very complicated one given financial scenarios for any religious institution, and that initial spend versus life cycle costs and rebates, etc. Shifting over to e-letters and PDFs rather than the paper newsletters, that has been going on now, Vijay, for about 3 years, maybe 2? Going less paper materials from 4 years, I'm sorry, right. We go on paperless, shifting the IT to the cloud as well. These small steps are also just helping in so many ways. And we've discussed lots of different ideas, and part of our objective when coming together and bringing these experts from different regions, different ideas, and different institutions was to see what we can do, what's the next step, right? To really consolidate and support the board, support the general council, and bring ideas to bear, and also follow through to support them so they can be enacted and sustained. And the last thing I'll say, and I want to open it up to questions and comments from you all, is just to give you a frame of reference. A big piece of the puzzle, which I think you all would agree, is the building. The building itself. How much does it consume? The individual practices are huge, not only from the congregation, but also from the leadership as well as the spiritual leaders as well. But what does the building itself do as an energy consuming entity? And I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but from a monthly spend perspective, the temple spends about $4,000 on electricity on a monthly basis. The waste, it has a fixed rate of 8 dumpster loads per month, and anytime it crosses over that, there's an extra cost. It's $3,500. Gas varies from $1,700 to $3,000 as well, and water is $2,000. So gross square footage of the temple, would you say?
What is it?
What is the rough square footage of the entire temple? 20,000 square
on
feet.
each floor, so
Of each
40,000.
So 40,000 square feet. So you're talking about maybe $15,000 per month for a 40,000 square foot building. So you're all very savvy, I'm sure you can run the math there. And we can talk a little bit about metrics about what other institutions are indexing against. And utilities is just one piece of that puzzle. In Maryland, the rebates, the cost of those utilities, and just the cost is one aspect, but of course every ounce of energy you draw, there's a carbon offset, or there's a carbon impact of that as well. So I just wanted to lay that back out there as the landscape. of what this temple has been doing as a leader in across all temples, hopefully, and just doing it of its own volition and from the congregation within. So yes.
Okay, I have a couple of comments first.
Please.
Originally, I assumed, so what can we do green for Hindu temples? My assumption was, I know you assume you're always I assumed that it was for temples in this country, but its descriptions primarily went to India, at least predominantly. I like the idea of getting the core engineers, architects, lower studies for a few temples and bringing them and making that's the only way to start infusing in. Okay. However, what works for Florida some may not work for Pittsburgh cloud. There's no, Pittsburgh, I can tell you, you can have your solar panels. Hardly. You know. There are probably 100 days in a year you get sun. So it's not going to cost effectiveness is not. I mean, she may disagree. And if it is so, it's fine. I don't have a problem. And the second thing is, yes, the temples are huge ships. They have their own inertia, and I don't deny that. But over the years, slowly, as people, it's like shipping big rock. So as people start talking and bringing at least a few temple or management or organizers or whatever, these ideas will percolate. Okay. The thing is, they have been doing the composting. Now, just to let you know, we are actually looking at the next step of not compostable, but like banana leaves, biodegradable. And just to show you, I mean, this is not yet happened because the cost effectiveness is, again, the cost study is going on. And I just brought you, I have no pictures of them, but I can download them right now because the guy just sent it, and it's a 2 megabyte, 3 megabyte something. This is from a betel-nut palm leaf, and their plates are made. This is biodegradable. So we don't use any more plastic things for religious purposes.
Upstairs.
Okay. And a couple of years back, a young woman who is doing her PhD took a time off, and she volunteered at the temple, and she started the recycling of or separating all the flowers and garlands as separate, forcing the people to do only that, because that is totally degradable, as opposed to they were putting everything together in the plastic. Now, recycling is a great thing, but recently I read some organizations working on it, saying, in fact, they don't even like recycling, because recycling, the energy spent on the recycling is quite a lot more than what people normally think. Okay? What they suggest is we should avoid having to recycle. So go in terms of metal containers and biodegradables and things like that. So that is the kind of approach we have to do. Certainly, we are doing it, but we are doing it in such a minor scale, and this kind of a town hall actually gives more momentum to the management to say why we should do. I mean, you are quite right. In fact, when this new thing goes on, I hope the management changes from here to, the energy efficient. 3 years back, 4 years back, there was a group of guys who came and they wanted to do it, but their code wasn't, whereas another temple, Murugan temple, was already done. Okay, so it's not like things are not being done. We are done in a very small scale, minute. But his idea of bringing, few temples initially. Probably a better way would be to not think of Livermore, SSVT and Pittsburgh, but think in terms of regionalization. Go to south, so bring Houston, Dallas, all those things there. Go to west. That time when you do it, those guys will be more apt to saying, okay, this is too cloudy here. What is the better alternative? That's just a suggestion.
Thank you. Any response or any other questions you want to take?
I mean, just to respond to that, so our organisation would love to work with SSVT on something like that, right? Even if we can localise it to the Metro DC areas. I think nationally, because I don't know much of America. I know California, I know New York, and I know DC. That's all I know.
Oh,
but yeah, I think to localise it makes a lot of sense. And I also think like having a moonshot project. So like at the moment the Green New Deal is out there. People are saying, okay, we need to like totally change our like energy and everything in the next 12 years. Like, let's have a moonshot project for the temples. Let's say like, and let's make it attractive. Let's say if we do weddings at a temple, let's say like all weddings at SSVT are like carbon neutral, plastic free, right? And you'll attract like so many young Hindus who want to do weddings that are like not harming the environment, right? And it's like, it makes sense from a religious perspective and it makes sense from a business perspective as well, right? And so like, there's things like that we can implement, which looks attractive, but actually is totally aligned to our values and ethos and what we're trying to achieve.
You mentioned, I'm still flow back and if there's any other questions, but you mentioned this a couple times, this alignment with business interests. Is this a critical piece?
I think, to be honest with you, for the Indian community, yes. Just being honest, but unfortunately, the reality is to address sustainability and climate change issues, most people have to look at the bottom line. And like, it's great to be motivated into action through consciousness and morality and ethics, but it has to make financial sense at the end of the day as well. And I think, especially for the Indian community, which is in the 1%, the other 1% of US society, I think trying to frame it not purely, but as a financial, economic proposition.
Part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Just to compliment that, I read a book recently called Capitalists Arise. And it was written by a man who's the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, I don't remember his name right now. And he was making the point that capitalism, business interests themselves have gone way out of line with even their own value structure years ago. And that even not too long ago, business owners would make a decision based on the benefit of the labor, the long-term benefit of the company, the impact on the city or the village where they lived, etc. He said, but now it's become all about short-term quarterly profits. They bring in a new CEO, pay him a lot of money, you can bring down the costs if you can maximize the profits. Who cares what the long-term effectiveness is? And this isn't me, I'm not a business major or person, but this is a capitalist speaking about how we're screwing things up. And he went so far as to say that the government can't even control it. That he was advocating the moral values of business people need to get more in line with a longer-term perspective. So I think it's important, business interests are there, but I also think, spiritual, religious communities have a role to say, hey, no, the moral impact matters. And I think in a practical sense, yeah, for most of us, it gets down to the bottom line. But we're supposed to be the people to say, the bottom line isn't in terms of short-term benefits. It's not about, okay, we have to do this because it's going to increase our productivity of, we'll find a less environmentally dangerous way to produce plastics. So what's the ultimate values of human life? And those are the things I think as a Hindu community, we bring those into play. Hey, we're just passing through. And while you're passing through, you're responsible and there is reactions for what we do. And let's be sensitive to that and make our decisions based on the long-term impact and what's the impact in terms of our own karma, what are we leaving for our children in the future and things like that. And I think, well, in a practical sense, we should really be saying, yeah, it's going to affect people in terms of the bottom line, especially in our communities, especially the affluence that our communities have. we at least ought to be able to say, we don't need to worry about the bottom line. One, because we have become so affluent generally. You know, the Hindu community is the wealthiest community in America. So if anybody can be able to say, hey, we take a loss on this, well, why not? Look how, if we can't take a loss, who can? And secondly, and I think more importantly, underline all that, what's the value system behind it? I think as Hindu communities, we have to be very, very careful that to a large extent we've sold our value system out to the modern capitalist idea, which is not the perfection of life. It's a slice of it. You know, the Vaishya community is really what we're talking about. The economic developing, the driving engine is an important part of society, but it's not the topmost value. It's an important part, but it's not the most important. America's become the most important one, and our value system is different. I think we have to remind ourselves of that and make those tough decisions. Yeah, this costs more, but it's the right thing to do. Easier to say than to do. I also have a board. Not so easy to convince. You know, I can speak philosophy all day long. A lot of times it gets back to what he said, but I'm making the point that as a community, really our long-term underlying emphasis should be, hey, this is the right thing to do.
Yes.
A comment. I think from what I've observed a lot of the time, it's the environmental issue is not bad intentions, but genuine lack of awareness, and I think that's across all generations. But I think I feel like really for long-term impact, it's starting when kids are really young. I don't remember learning about climate change or in a practical way how you can be more environmentally friendly, and I think one way that we can kind of improve that is from the teachings at the temple, and when we start to teach Hinduism from the beginning, build that into the teaching as well. But I also wanted to get your thoughts on that.
An anecdote from one of my colleagues at U.S. Green Building Council. There are a lot of LEED certified schools in the region, and they were attending a meeting at a school out in Manassas, a very LEED certified school, and my colleague wanted to recycle his bottle, his bottled water. And I think he was a kindergartner, he said, walked him, into the kitchen area and explained what all the different receptacles meant. And so for my colleague Nate to just realize sort of the impact on how young these children are that are learning this and then taking it home, and again we mentioned this, complaining to their parents, mommy and daddy, why aren't you doing this? Getting them really early is just really, really important, definitely.
Yeah. Vijay, you're running some education classes for the under 12, under 14 crowd right now, right?
As well as for adults and young professionals.
As well as for adults.
Which one's easier?
Does the
Good question.
does the environmental threads, do they run through the current curriculum in any way, shape, or form?
Absolutely. If you look on the wall, both up top as well as on the library, how we've structured the library and the institution, we've taken a who, what, when, where, how, and why approach to how we've structured education here in the temple from a multidisciplinary standpoint. So therefore, number 6 is actually around sacred geography, institutions, and environment. So we tried to embed it, hard-coded right there into how we structure the content, how we then have classes that deliver across these multidisciplines. And so that way we're looking at texts, we're looking at people, personalities, scholars, and language-speaking communities. We're looking at the history, the legacies, the contemporary studies, the anthropology. Looking at philosophy and meaning, obviously. Rites and rituals and practices. And then the where. Pilgrimage points, geography, institutions, the environment, trying to factor that in. And that's actually a plug from our side that, since you gave us a plug for your text, and I actually just downloaded and read it. So any reading material, any literature, any data that you can provide us that we could use, best practices standpoint, playbooks, we want to stack the shelves and make sure that we're archiving and making content available. So that way we can inform leadership within the temples, such as this one, as well as inform our classes. So that way we bring it to bear, bring it to practice. And then of course the 7th one, art design. So,
Can I put my friend Gautami on the spot to just describe a program that we have that has to do with curriculum for children?
Sure. Hi, I'm the friend on the spot. I'm also with the U.S. Green Building Council. I'm also an architect and happy to support any future studies. We have a program called the Building Learners Program, It's built for K through 12 students, and it's essentially a hands-on teaching curriculum where you learn about environmental data available in buildings like the utility, gas, waste. You learn how to audit a space to understand what's right and what might not be right. Then you learn how to benchmark it. So how bad or good are you? And then what do you do about it? So it's available for K through 12. It's available for them to implement in their school. It can also be used here. We can send more information.
That's great.
Thank
And
you.
another piece of our
I told her I was going to put her.
another piece of our adult professional classes that are held in the week is that they're also multi-religious. So therefore, Mahayana Buddhism, Taoism, Shinto in Japan, shaman traditions all throughout Northeast and Southeast Asia that filter their ways even into Latin America. So here we have disciplines across the board, communities, religio-philosophical traditions that have all hard-coded environmental best practices into their philosophical and religious doctrine. So we have partners globally that we can leverage in terms of green.
And the adult class you're referring to is the Wednesday night online one, right? Not a physical space. I mean, I don't know where you are. I'm sure you're somewhere, but you're doing it, and it's people all around the world.
Yes. We've got folks from California dialing in, to New York, two people that are in India. We're dialing for us.
I'm going to get this story about 80% accurate, but
that's
it
perfect.
came out this past Earth Day. There was a study, I believe, commissioned by National Public Radio, asking parents about their comfort in teaching climate education to their kids, and it was more like, oh no, yeah, we're really supportive of it, but it's not something we really can do, but we'll have the teachers do it. And then the teachers, even looking at science teachers in America, they're not all comfortable teaching it either. So I think it does really speak to the opportunity in the faith space to be making those connections. I don't know if the Hindu faith has a similar issue, but I'm Unitarian Universalist, and in our faith tradition, we're having a hard time retaining like 10 and under kiddos in our religious exploration programs. But a recent story came out about this 1 week of summer camp is equivalent to a year of religious education. So and I noticed on your website that you guys have a summer camp here, so like just kind of embedding those things in, kind of getting those kids maybe who will be there for the week.
In fact, our design pattern for our summer camp, right at the top, was using counselor students that are coming in to volunteer to get SSL student hours to be able to jump right in with the recycling, the cleanup, the environmental and green activities.
Honor, yes.
One observation I made, I think I understand you are going to build a new temple. It's a good possibility you can make it next year. My observation is basically have regular plan, integrate the whole Hindu philosophy in Hindu temples. And having cows, growing your own things, have grown foods, everything in the big area, and integrate with the new technologies, have diesel power, ozone generation power, along with the solar collectors, and usage of complete daylighting everywhere, you can make that happen. It looks like it, because you're using the entire byproducts that comes out of the temple, goes into the ground, it becomes smelly, and you can generate electricity.
Yeah, some of the temples are doing that. I think you should be on our board for this. About what we're going to do. But,
Well, I'm gonna, this is the day of putting people on the spot. I'm gonna put my father on the spot, who just asked the question. So I'm gonna ask you a question. You ready? So my father was part of the founding trustee group that founded this temple. His company that he started with my mother and then my brother and I are part of now designed the HVAC into the MEP, etc. So I'm going to give you the heads up on what the question is, and I'm going to give people in the room a little bit of bio on you as to why I'm asking you this question. So the question is going to be, in what ways did the Hindu values that we've discussed here inform why you did what you did in the 70s and 80s? So that's the question. So in the 70s and 80s, my father designed the California State Office Building, Sacramento State Office Building, and with a colleague of his that was an architect, and sustainability has been a feature of his work for a couple decades now. They put rainwater harvesting, solar panels, green roof in the 70s when it was horrifically expensive, but they did that for some sort of reason. So my question for the group and to you is, how did the Hinduism aspect and the value statements that we've talked about here that Gopal brought up at the beginning, how did that inform what you did and why you did it, if at all?
Well, if you go back to 1970s, that's what we are talking about. It's very few people in the architectural industry had the vision of creating and using natural resources. It's not, at that time, it was not in a full-blown way of the ozone generation, temperature increase. Now there are a lot of scientific results are there. You can clearly indicate what are the temperatures, how it is going up, what is the effect of ozone. All these things are there technically and mathematically, you can calculate now. But about 40 years ago, it was not there at that time. But according to him, in Hindu temples and the peoples who come in, they have their vision, so we can give all the inputs we have done. But it is totally difficult to implement all the things because of the cost, as you all mentioned. I think, for example, this temple itself, if you go inside, I was talking about putting complete daylighting. It's very easily to be done by putting tubes, solar tubes. You can create a lot of things. But the cost was a big thing, which was, it didn't happen. I had to fight for this kitchen dining area. I don't know whether you have seen it or not. Before it was built, it was like a basement area. And a pond was there with all the water and everything. Nothing was there. So I insisted at that time, you can have a complete glass wall, allow daylighting to come, and put all the trees and everything, make a creation of the pond. And the high ceilings we created, and incorporation of the wood into the system, it gave a different kind of picture, and it helped there. That's how we did certain things.
And this is all from your reading of the Upanishads?
This is what I said was the integration of the old technologies, old culture, and the new technologies. The new technologies is observation. The one I was talking about, the old culture was having cows. We'll go back to one thing I read. The houses in India are net zero about 100 years ago. They have cows, they have everything. They get the cow dung, they use it for fireplaces, they put it on the walls and everything, and they get the daylighting, it is self-sufficient. And they have wells, and they get the water. See, that's how it was done. Now, the same concept, that's what I was trying to tell you, if you have more acres, you can bring in the same old technologies that were used in India about 100 years ago and incorporate it. And the integration of the new one is generation of power. I think Fairfax County has got a huge recycle plant. We have about 5 to 10 acres. They put all this waste, and then they create ozone and put the generators into the picture and connect to the electricity grid. So you can definitely make self-sufficient if you are building new building with a lot of integration of the old and the new technology. That's what I was telling you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious. You talk about the environment and all that, greening. Then why were so many trees were cut down? Almost a lot of woods were destroyed to build this parking lot.
I think that goes back to one of your original points about what are the. Well, I asked a question at the beginning, which you may have missed, which was what are the problems that I forgot my question, but essentially, what are the problems that exist from an environmental perspective that religious institutions are causing already? And you had mentioned, if you want to reiterate your comment at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, and I was saying across the board, just by building a place of religious worship, that there's an element of environmental destruction there inherent. Just by us living, we're harming the environment, right? So if we're going to build a building.
Yeah, a lot of gear is to be there, and I don't know what happened to them.
Well, Helen, I think, made the point on that you know, especially we don't live in a village in India where we pick fruit and grow some rice and throw the extra vegetables to the cow who produces dung. You know, we're not in that kind of environment. In fact, globally, till a few years ago, that type of lifestyle was considered primitive. You know, now people are saying, how do we get back there? So I think, in answer to his question, it's a trade-off. And I think the question is, you know, the idea comes to my mind, like when you have a child, you let them out the door and they're at risk. You know, sometimes parents who are unstable, you know, go to an extreme and protect their children so much that they can't grow. So you have to do the very best you can, and that's a priority. But you can't do everything perfectly. You know, you can't, unless you're going to, you know, tie yourself to your child and follow around school all day. So in the same way, you know, we have to try to make decisions where the value is to be as environmentally conscious as we can, to make that individual statement. Because I think three things really. What do we do individually? And what you primarily talk about, what do we do as an institution? And then there's a third level that I kind of mentioned earlier, which is what do we do as far as being teaching advocates? Kind of like what you're doing, you know, people come and look at the wall and then it goes around the world. So there really is three levels. There's me, there's the community, and there's what can we do to teach. And we're never going to get it right perfectly. I mean, you know, I drive a Prius, but I drove. I didn't take public transport. And you know, public transport, that's the best. And if you can't do that, so it's kind of like, well, if you can't do that, it's like in the Bhagavad Gita. You know, Krishna says, you know, give up everything and surrender. If you can't do that, at least do this. If you can't do that, at least do this. If you can't do that, at least do this. If you can't do that, can you at least try to do this? You know, so I think that's essential. Let's try. Because I think there's a lot of people that will kind of say, you know, it didn't come up too much. You mentioned a little about the cow, but you know, you read many places, if there's one thing we want to do about improving the environment of the world and protect the environment is become a vegetarian. A lot of very different benefits. So a similar thing, okay, if someone can't be, say, vegan, as I know Gopal is, at least be strict vegetarian. If you can't do that, at least don't eat beef. If you can't do that, at least cut down once a month. At least, you know, do something, you know. So I think that's a big part of it, is to create that kind of an environment that, because otherwise sometimes people just feel guilty, oh, it's too much trouble, it costs too much money, so we're going to do zero. But just instead create that environment. We'll take the first step, well, geez, that was not actually too painful, that was pretty nice. Let me try the next step and the next step and the next one. That's kind of the culture that needs to be created.
Just wrap up shortly with a few last
I actually wanted to ask, there's a couple of little themes that kind of rise to the top. And one is, you know, going back to our values and connecting ourselves back to nature. And I wanted to actually ask Anna, you know, in biophilic design, that's the whole purpose, right? So is there a way, or are there concepts that we can, you know, the building's here, we can't, you know, break down a wall, put in sunlight, right? But what are ways that people can kind of slowly bring in that connectivity to rebuild our values, to rebuild that connectivity to nature, so that it kind of more is conscious to us? If that makes
So the kind of features that we show off, and I wanted to put that out there, that I would love to host any of you guys in our office. If anybody wants to I've given many tours of our office and love to show off the different concepts that we have. So the types of strategies that we implement are the types of materials that came into the space, and so some of the lot of the natural materials that came into the space have their own really interesting stories, how they came to us. Views, you know, just being able to see, even though you said you can't knock down walls and things, but people having access to daylighted views is cool. We have symbols of nature throughout the design of our space, so just little subtle things on the glass that might be the leaves of our logo. We have an oak leaf logo for USGBC. Pictures, abstract pictures of nature we have around the space. What else do we have for biophilic? What am I missing?
There's some plants.
Oh yeah, we have lots of plants. And we also have a water feature. I'm not sure if you guys have any water features inside your space, but having that, when you walk into our lobby and you have this 2-story waterfall, and you think of nature, you know. And the fact that we've made it so that 97% of our seats are you can see outdoors. So it's not just the people with the corner offices that get the views, but we've made it so that the people internal of the space can still see. So there's definitely
The point you're making is funny because we have this little creek. So water features are central to Hindu temples. Certainly,
Yeah.
there's always a massive tank, usually that's near a temple. And that's actually for the water from rain to run down into it. So it's not normally being fed artificially in any way. But I think that, yeah, to that point, like we could make our creek a feature instead of kind of this weird thing that we just drive over to get to the parking
Yeah,
lot,
if people
right?
can-
So, I mean, I think to that point, like there are things that, CDELP we can start to think about.
Can I mention citizen science really quickly?
Yeah.
'Cause that's, so that's the other hat that I wear with Capital Nature is I'm a total nature nerd. Very involved in citizen science, and if you don't know what that is, it's basically having lay people out doing scientific projects, collecting data, taking pictures of things, and it all goes for a big purpose where you're trying to solve a problem. And so an example of that would be this past weekend, the 26th to the 29th, was something called the City Nature Challenge. And it was something that I was really involved with. I was the outreach lead for the DC region, and we were competing against 168 cities around the world. There's an app called iNaturalist. It's free. So if you're a nature nerd like me, or if you're out walking every day and you want to take pictures of maybe bugs or flowers or something like that, you would take a picture of it, and it's geo-tagged with your phone location or whatever, and it goes into a scientific database. And it's crowdsourced validation. There are 460,000 people using it around the world. So if I put, I'm not sure what kind of flower this is, there's somebody that might in India that might know what kind of flower that is and might go on there and say, yep, that's American. That type of thing. So what we did this past 4 days is this competition. We tried to see how many people, families, kids, scouts. I took people out of the U.S. Green Building Council during our lunch break to do it. Just get people outdoors so that they're paying attention, they're stopping, and they're connecting. But the things that they're doing are contributing to science. And why is it important? They can aggregate all the data, look at patterns of our birds not as north as they should be, and is this going to change? Is this because of climate change? Are they not coming as far north? That type of thing. So it's one of those things that I just want to put out there that even on a very individual level, just with a little app on your phone. Here you mentioned species protection today for the Cornell Laboratory of Cornell Lab for Ornithology, for birds. It's called the Global Big Day today, and so around the world. And I did this before I came here. I took my app eBird, walked around my neighborhood in Burke, and counted birds, and put it in my thing, and my checklist goes in with everybody else's checklist. And so, just even those little pieces, still contribute to the bigger piece.
Yes.
Our two temple trustees that were in the room earlier, they unfortunately had to leave a little bit early. But one of the questions that they left me with before they stepped out, they pulled me out the door for a second, was. We're kind of looking at it from three ways. One of the things that they wanted to do was to maybe establish a tiger team out of this to be able to inform them to make leadership decisions around making environmentally conscious and more green-related decisions. So I was kind of thinking at it from three standpoints, like doing a cursory of the text that you did the plug for. You mentioned biodiversity, energy efficiency, carbon footprinting, water conservation, waste management, cost efficiency, and maybe wildlife and plant life impact. But is there anything that we're not thinking about in terms of broad strokes from the top down? That's one question. Second question is microservices. Like one of our sister temples that's up in Frederick, Maryland, the Bhakta Anjaneya Temple. They've got their own couple of cows on a farm right there, right next to the temple, providing services of consumable products to help them perform the services inside of the temple. What are some examples of microservices, whether it's a cow on a farm that's on site to solar panels up on the roof, to be able to top down those broad strokes that we had was, we went to cloud services so we could reduce the carbon footprint of.
Conversation about cows.
You can put solar panels on the huge parking lot.
As I said before we all gathered and we had the small kind of roundtable earlier, add one thing which is advocacy. Just talk about this. Talk about it in your congregation, put up posters, put on your website, talk about kids.
Social media.
There's the school strikes going on right now. I know Indians, we don't want to take our kids out of school, but that's something we can support, right? Talk about getting children involved in climate change. Let's take on the school strike. And so I think let's think like how we can mainstream this and normalize this in the temple community. So it's not like a team or a project, but like this is the temple. SSVT is known to be an earth-honoring temple, and everything we do is infused with that. And I think that's something that can affect every single operation. But I think that's something that's kind of my other passion, which is like how to get Hindu organizations more engaged in the public space. And I think you guys are really positioned to that in the right direction.
Thank you.
Well, one thing you can tell is the follow Title 24 California. Of course, this is not applicable in this area, PG County, but as a temple, you can build that one as a guide. And that will bring this temple to a much, much, much more energy efficient. Because California is leading in all respects. What you are talking about, it is a code requirements that have to be implemented in California. As a temple, you can take that guide and say implement it. Even though it is not a guide for PG County, you can achieve whatever you think.
Well, I'm mindful of everyone's time, and I wanted to just wrap up, and Sujata's got some closing comments for us as well. But before she does, I wanted to say thank you all for your time, your patience showing up on a Saturday, fighting traffic, or maybe you took the bus, which is great, or maybe you walked.
Or
maybe you're gonna watch it on our live stream, so that's also there as well, on our YouTube videos. So this whole session has been recorded, will be reposted, Vinny will be getting it up on our YouTube channel as well. Please feel free to share it with your friends.
And subscribe to our channel.
And subscribe to our channel, that's right. Vijay is exactly right. Our next, where do we take this forward? We are constituting and standing up a active subgroup that is going to continue this momentum and move it forward and advocate from within, bolster programs, structure them, and support the board and the general counsel further. So if anyone's interested in that, and I really appreciate you not only setting the stage for us here, integrating, and I hope you will remain resources for us to reach out to as we continue to move this all very forward. So the last thing I'll say, and I think one of the big pieces of this is as we go towards advocacy, and I'm going to leave it as an open-ended question, and then Sujata, you can wrap us up, please, is how has the efforts that you've all undertaken and that we've all undertaken for green initiatives helped bring us closer to Hinduism or our faith that we subscribe to? In what ways and in what shape has that done that? And I think that's another level of incorporating that piece for others is, hey, this is showcasing that this has actually brought me closer to Hinduism, to my faith where I started from or where I've ended up or where I am now, because I've gone through this route. It's taken me there. So something to keep on considering about. So John?
Yeah. First, I want to thank our panelists. I think we should do and to kind of take the lead from Rohit is that a lot of what Rohit just spoke about is about reflection, right? And it's about taking what we're learning and then taking what we're doing and making sure there's kind of that integration between those two and making sure that we're constantly reflecting on that. And in that light, I actually kind of accidentally, I feel like got involved in CDELG. I actually came here with this attitude, just listening to a town hall, just like everyone here, and just asked a lot of questions, looked like I was super interested, so I think Murli at the time just pulled me in and was like, we kind of need people like you. So the folks here, please come and give us your ideas and help us. And some of the ideas that have been given to us in the past are I'm going to share a few of the town halls that are coming up. So as we know, the Hindu community is broad, and it also includes people that are Hindu who travel to different parts of the world and grew up there. And so in that light, we're doing a panel, kind of a town hall discussion on Hindus of the Caribbean. So, and while we're saying it's the Caribbean, we're hoping that all Hindus will obviously come and join that discussion and hear about how some traditions are a little bit different, how folks in the Caribbean have incorporated many of the different cultures of the Caribbean into the Hindu traditions, and even kind of how there's been maybe a little bit of cross-pollination of like interesting traditions that have crossed over to other parts. So that'll be actually on June 1st. So this is your moment to take your phones out and put it in your calendars. So June 1st, it's also going to be announced obviously on the website and on our on the various SSVT channels. Another event coming up is in September on colorism. And South Indians, we were infamous for having these kind of prejudices about different skin colors. And so as some of the youth that really care about that, we're going to have a town hall on that. That's September 14th. And we're going to have a dialogue on October 26th around how we can support chaplains who are kind of, I don't know what the word is, they're kind of liaisons or intermediaries, they're knowledgeable resources that often are placed in our military or in universities. And we want to find out how the temple community can help our Hindu chaplains and support them in their activities. So that dialogue is happening in October 26th.
And a shout out to Kavita, who is the Hindu chaplain at American University
Yeah.
here in the DC area.
Yes, and Kavita will be hosting on August 10th, right, our conflict resolution workshop. So that one's going to be hands-on, an activity for people to join in, so keep an eye out for that. So thank you
And
for...
the last thing is we have a master class on filmmaking, which is not on that schedule yet.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's in the works on how to, filmmaking that is going to be led by a member of our community about social activism through filmmaking. So that's it. Okay, so we invite you to stay,
Can we
chat.
close with him as well?
Pardon?
Can we have a closing hymn as well?
Go ahead.
Thank you again for all the guidance and the best practices. A hymn to Mula Prakriti, the goddess, and symbolizing the total environment.
Thank you all.
I'll take it for you.
Yeah, I have mine.
It's actually over.
We put the other slide up.
It's been up live. Broadcast.
Yeah, we can play
We also do have soft.
Yeah, it's off. It's already up on
Oh. We broadcast live already.
Which, yeah.
I know a guy. I know a guy in Chennai that does that.
Actually, I think you're next on closer. You're gonna be.
We're gonna flank the side.
All right.
So we need to be like,
So that they can see the green part.
You might have to stand a little bit closer to each other.
Okay. Like we know each other.
Yeah. Smile.
Okay.
And what would the hashtags for be? Would it be SSBT?
Yeah. Hashtag green SSBT.
Thank you so much, appreciate it.
Yeah. It will be. As you were saying, we should limited group, but
I'll make sure to get my card out.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you. Yeah, for sure. We'll have to do more follow-ups, as you said. It's a
So you can get a card of mine if you want to have a tour, or I have little postcards about my organization, Capital Nature. Nature STEM.
I'm curious.
We're good.
So actually, are you familiar with biophilic disease? So yeah, this is the biophilic disease. Yes.
Yeah, I'm also good.
Then
Our building, it's a 20% building, so it's on your GDP. Yeah. I challenge people to try to save money there.
Well, today's the article we have, right?
Yeah.
It depends every day. Like, so why did you change gender? Oh, actually, I'm just switching on everything. Yes, yeah. So most people.
No, and I agree. I mean, I would.
Think of an aha moment, so it's aha.
But I think it's an interesting challenge.
Yeah. Anyway, if you guys, you go to Capital website, you're curious about nature activities, definitely sign up for our newsletter. We have multiple questions set up in the newsletter. And science, university, of course,
Oh, yeah, I've heard of it.
yes, I can totally.
And iNaturalist is always available. So you can always use the iNaturalist. You know, you start going and
So we right now, we're doing content right now, we're just other people, so I know a lot of blocks, and I'm getting trained. So there's actually people who certified course.
You have to institutionalize.
I haven't done yet, but my goal is next year do it so that I can be a certified course certificate. We have about 22 in the region right now, and it's basically a guided meditative walk in nature. Yes, it started, and it's super chill, love here. It's just, yeah, so definitely on our website, on our calendar, for all the different courses. Or just pop me an email and be like, Anna, when can I come to the next video? I can give you, I have books on it, on resources. You're sure. Anna, nice to meet you. Yeah. No, I'd love to hear about that. That's great.
Thank you so much.
It's a very interesting project. Yeah, we just went upstairs, they have a green wall on the front, so it's shiny stuff. A lot of detail, a lot of really cool.
Good speaker.
So if you ever have a chance to visit it, I would definitely visit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's right in the mall.
Can I do the data now? It's cheaper. Okay.
Data's my friend.
Right, I think maybe around about 5 minutes an hour, just walking around. Yes. Yeah, the material. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a switch.
I was telling you, in that case, you should have.
So it's a great only one show of examples.
Great.
Yeah, that's right.
Encouragement.
Oh, that's okay. I Okay, so this is about the whole application program. And thanks so much, guys.
So one of my like favorite things to do when I go to India is to go to temples.
Okay, cool.
One of the big things I know
I think you should make it.
I should assume that like well sustainability. That's
Thank you.
Looking forward to
Yeah, just like show it. It's something. I mean, you say they only like those.
We wanted to distribute
It seemed just like a lot of
Somebody told me like, but it's like basically like that goes
Yeah, it's not great shape, right? I know, and I was so today is service day.